Control points, checkpoints, stations, whatever you may call them, they're extremely important in just making sure that one, your correction source to your GPS receiver is on point and accurate, and two, making sure any data layers you might have set up in ArcGIS field maps, QField, any sort of data collection app you're using are configured correctly. Just make sure that all your points are going to line up on top of each other and all of those coordinates are in the proper system. So today we're going to go over the process of one, finding a control point, and GS survey control monuments serve as a fantastic one, all the way to actually shooting a point over that, post-processing it, and just making sure you have the full story from A to Z about which point you're collecting, which datum you're in, the coordinate system you're using, the correction source you're using, making sure everything lines up. So in the future, as long as you follow the same steps, any points that you shoot out in the field of your assets are going to be exactly where they should be. So this is the best real life scenario method to actually ensure that your points are accurate.
NGS survey control monuments are placed all across North America, or the US specifically, known as brass caps, and these serve as controls for different areas. So NGS monument data sheets, they're reported in NAD 83 2011 almost all the time if they've been updated recently. Really, you want to just use the ones that have GPS control. When we go through our demonstration, I'll show you what those look like. Just gonna have a black triangle, because you know those are the most accurate and they're going to have an expected datum. So it's a great way to see if your GNSS is operating as expected, if your data layers are set up correctly, if your base station is working well. It's just really nice setting up on a known monument that other people have shot. And you know, if you're making a mistake, you can see what your offset is, or you know, whatever problem you're having. It's a great way before you go out for the day, complete your survey, that everything is working as expected. So you're also going to want to create a data layer configuration before you go out there. So no matter what data collection app you're using, if you're using our Battle Flex app, where you're just naming some points, you can be using ArcGIS field maps, where you're creating some complex forms and using satellite maps and using prior existing layers to go ahead and locate. You want to make sure everything is set up properly. So you really want to avoid using transformations when possible. We've gone over a whole bunch of different variables and systems and everything today, because it really gets complicated. And no matter what, if you're doing transformation, if you're trying to go from one system to another, it's always going to involve some amount of errors. Sometimes this error is acceptable. I'm going to show you how a couple of nice free tools available through the NGS website can account for that. And you can use that to go from one system to another, but it should really be avoided when possible. But just at the end of the day, if you have coordinates, you are good to go. You can always convert them later. So I would always try to save your coordinates along with so your coordinates include the ellipsoidal height as well, along with the datum and the date. That way you can always shift everything later. If let's say you set up your layer wrong, you didn't realize it originally, you have all that information in your table, your lat long coordinates along your datum and date, and you could always shift them after the fact. You can interpret what's going on. So yeah, we store all that metadata, and we actually, in our new firmware update, we actually send all that to field maps. But you can, what also we recommend doing if you are using a different third-party data collection app, we're compatible with all of them. The only thing is, though, we might not send all of the metadata over just because of how that functions. We send over a specific set of messages that are standardized, so not necessarily all of our custom data fields. So what you can do, you can just start something called a track log. And that track log will store all your information that you need and more, and it'll have that date stamp on it. So all you can, so you have that stored. It uses very little memory and power. You can just throw that in your computer, just store that as a backup. And then at the end of the day, if you realize you need more metadata, all you have to do is just reference that data point you collected in your app. Hopefully it has the date and time associated with it. Most of them do collect that. And then you can just reference it with that track log at that specific time. And since it collects a point every second, you can get your exact information on accuracy, satellites, coordinates, et cetera, at the exact moment. It'll have all your metadata after the fact. But yeah, we'll show you how to join it right away. So there's no post-processing necessary. So yeah, so just the process, what we're going to go through here, we're just going to set up a data collection layer. We're going to do it on ArcGIS field maps, but you certainly do the standalone or with any other app. We're just going to create a layer in NAT83 2011, again, just to avoid any transformations. There's always going to be some amount of error involved, whether it's human, software-based, no matter what. It's just better to avoid those transformations, if at all possible, not always possible. We'll show you how you can actually collect RTK data in either WGS or NAT83 without, so you don't have to do any transformations. So another nice new feature we'll show you in a second. We'll locate an NGS monument to use as a control. We'll collect points with SBAS, which is just your basic booted up, you just using satellites. Then we'll use RTK with those real-time corrections from a base station in NAT83 and do a raw log. And then we'll do a little post-processing with those NGS tools I was talking about. All right, so let me go ahead and switch screens really quick right here. All right, so we're over here in ArcGIS Pro. So we're going to create a data layer to use for data collection. So I'm just going to call control right here. Make sure that Z value box is checked. We are interested in Z's. We're not going to add any fields right now. Right now, we're just going to set it up as NAT83 2011. Make sure you set your vertical as well. You can add some fields over here too before you upload it. Right now, we're just doing our basic metadata points, but if you're collecting specific layers, definitely set up those fields. So now we have our data collection layer set up. I have this custom toolbox that's available on our website that'll add all of our custom metadata fields to whatever layer you want. So all you have to do is just load that into your toolbox, click run. It will add all of those extra fields that will store your geoids, your datums, your orthometric heights. Right straight out of the box, Field Maps is actually using our onboard geoid, which isn't nearly as accurate as the geoid 18 that's used with NAVD 88. And so using these custom metadata fields, you get your correct orthometric heights instead of the lower resolution one. That's not necessarily correct for that use case. So definitely worth trying that out. Again, that tool is available on our website. So this is the NGS survey data explorer. So we're just going to find a monument. This is one in our area. So this monument has known coordinates. They're in NAT83. Highly accurate. This is a GPS controlled monument. Again, look for that black triangle because some of them aren't as good. And someone else has shot this right here. So they took some pictures. We have a latitude and longitude. And so very well-known coordinates. Right here, I'm just checking that layer I just uploaded just to make sure it is in NAT83. It is. So that's a very common mistake on using field maps. You might not be using the right projection on your layers. Just make sure that's correct. I'm going to pause and go back for a second right here. So what I'm doing right here is we're using 0.1 navigation. So what 0.1 navigation is, it's a set of base stations or a series of base stations that are set up across the country. And what they do is that they send corrections over. So these base stations are in known locations. And since they're in known locations, they can account for whatever atmospheric conditions are at the time that introduce GPS error. So the primary cause of GPS error is just that atmosphere might be a little bit different in condition that day. It's going to affect your satellite signals coming in from the satellite. So what you do, you stream in these corrections from this known spot over the internet. It'll provide a correction to your data, and you'll go from, right as you see right here, from about a 6 inches to a foot of accuracy to about a centimeter to an inch. So it's definitely recommended using. If you have a Battleflex standard, you can use a little bit of token to activate that mode. At extreme, it's active all the time. And then you just have to find a provider of these base stations. So 0.1 Nav, that is our partner. So it's a $99 a month subscription, but it's really nice because it's fully integrated in our app. It requires basically no setup. You don't have any credentials. Basically, your login is the Flex itself. And this allows you to collect points in either NAT83 or ITRF. But if you don't want to use that, if you have your own network in your area, you could definitely use that as well. It's we save everything in the app. We have a nice checklist workflow. Really, all you have to do is just go to correction mode and trip RTK, and then just hit the blue button to connect. So probably can connect probably no more than 10 seconds after boot up. And then you just go over to your data collection app. So super fast and easy. But what I'm doing right here is just switching 0.1 navigation corrections from NAT83. We have that by default, but we want ours in ITRF. So I just switched that over, and it's you can switch those on the fly. So if you want some points in NAD, some in ITRF, you can just switch back and forth between those. So if you have some data in WGS or ITRF, again, equivalent, you can go ahead and just collect with those, but with the high accuracy you get from RTK. So for most RTK options, you cannot do that in real time. So might be nice for some applications. So we're just going to collect a point right here. First, start a track log, so we have all that metadata. So we're just collecting a point on our monument. Then we're going to connect to point one nav to get those RTK corrections. Looks like it just connected. You can see that RTK fixed in the top left and where that data is streaming in. We're going to collect another point just as a reference. Again, all we're doing here is just collecting control. And then we're going to go over to field map. So this is our new little function right here. So all I did right here. So what we're doing here is just sending all that metadata over. Originally, you could use field maps. We're fully integrated with the Battle Flex and field maps, but we weren't necessarily sending our complete set of metadata over. So now with this, we can actually flow points over. And so all it is doing right here is just asking you to set your pole height and your orthometric model using the geoid that we just discussed. And we can send all that information over. So just turn this on. We're going to switch over to field maps really quick and collect a point. We're just going to configure our settings, make sure those are correct. Set up our profile right here. If you use an RTK, you can set that up. And all that profile does is just converts your coordinates from whatever datum you're in to whatever datum the layer is in your map. So if those are different, definitely go ahead and adjust that. So I just collected a point right there. You can see it switched back to our app and then it went right back over. And then we filled in all that information over here on the left. And all that metadata is filled out from datum, accuracy, geoid, et cetera, all that information's there. So now we're done collecting our points right here. We can post-process a point. So how this works is that you shoot a raw log. So a raw log is just a whole bunch of raw satellite data that we collect over the period of 15 minutes. And you can post-process after the fact using this tool called Opus, available on the NGS website or NOAA website specifically. And what this does, it references it with a whole bunch of those base stations that I was talking about in your area. And then it will account for those corrections and then go ahead and process your point. And you get an output point in both NAD83 as well as ITRF 2014. So these can be held as truth. Ignore these accuracies right here for the specific time. The base stations weren't very close, but in most cases, you should get a much better accuracy. And then you can determine how well your RTK is working at the time. So I would really go ahead and combine the data sheet that we looked at as well as the shared solution and use all that information determining how accurate your point is. So what we're doing right here, we're just taking our points that we collected and we're going to submit it into a couple of these NGS tools. So this one's called NCAT. It's very useful for switching between different realizations of NAD83. So this one right here, we're just going to upload that data file. And then what it outputs is a whole bunch of state plane coordinates as well as UTM. And you can transform it as, again, between different realizations of NAD83. It does not work from going to WGS to NAD83 though. So we're going to use a different tool called HTTP, the horizontal time displacement tool, also available from the same website. So we're going to go over there. We're just going to go ahead and choose our file, just a simple CSV with the lat, long, and ellipsoidal height. We're going to go ahead and choose our datums we want to transform between, the dates of the epochs, and right here you can see our transform points show up on the screen. So how are we doing on the time right here? Oh, this is definitely going much longer than I thought. Feel free to email me if you have any questions. Sorry about that. But just kind of wrapping it up here. If you do collect some points and you see an offset between the base map and your points, do not worry because the base maps frequently are not incredibly accurate. And also you might be using a different datum. So base maps are great for using as reference points, but you do not always want to use them as absolute truth. So as long as you have those numbers in your metadata, they do not lie. As long as they have the context of the datum, the accuracy and everything, and the date, you can have all that information ready to go. But just rely on the points, GNSS observations, not necessarily the base map. If you do need a higher quality base map, you can shoot your own with the orthomosaic using drones, as well as different private providers.